Development-Prozess.
But I think, so I think most of the things, we should probably just quickly go through the things on your list.
Yeah,
and then several of the things on my and Eric's lists are kind of moot because we are going to go through the whole like Imba 2.0 thing. And I think that will take most of the time to discuss about that.
So should we do a status first?
Yeah, we can do a status first. I think you should run the meeting.
Okay, we can do that. So I think then I would like to take over the screen for maybe a few minutes just to do something in Git speak. Okay. So let me see if I can ask Zoom. This will stop other. Okay. Let's see. And where is Git speak? Yeah. Do you see Git speak? Eric, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know if we support this feature yet, but yeah, we support it. So one of the things we tried out was Hacktoberfest, and it was working very good, in my opinion. Like, created the issues, and then suddenly people were opening up pull requests very quickly. Mm-hmm. I tried to nudge Sindre a couple of times to create more issues, but he's been busy. So I only did a couple of low-hanging fruits, and Sindre tried to provide feedback in the comments for more advanced things. And I don't remember what the actual count is, but let's say maybe 3 to 5 things were merged.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was very cool. And let's see, can I go back to the Google Docs thing from here? Let's see, let me try.
Maybe I should move closer, just.
So I think, yeah, the docs is there, so Hacktober was good. We should definitely try to do more of that and help out beginners. And I tried looking at the parcel thing, and the documentation wasn't so good, so I just closed the tab, unfortunately. Because like I didn't understand it, so I was going to actually ask Eric about it. I have to follow that up again. So the next thing was the Imba.io translation stuff. It wasn't on the agenda, but I followed that up. So the branch is working, and I've also asked a friend of mine, Morty, to do the Chinese translation. So the goal is to have the front page like welcome.md, hero.md and scrimba.md. So if we get those translated, then we have the front page in other languages. And I plan on doing some stuff with the guide. I want to rename it and then slice it up into different sections. Mm-hmm. So I've been thinking about how can I do that and what makes sense. But I don't have any concrete proposal yet. But what we call guide right now is going to be more and more misleading, based on at least the direction I want to go in. So I'm going to try to propose a couple of things maybe in the next 3 weeks. So yeah, and I also started reading the ES6 spec. It's very long. 500 pages. So, but it was interesting to see some of the grammar and just get a picture of it. Yeah. So I was thinking maybe I could, if I read through it within this month, then I could maybe be pedantic when you do the ES6 rewrite. Yeah, so that's basically my topics.
Yeah, it's cool. Maybe Eric can go through the branding update and Spectrum thing.
So I think I made a pull request, and I say I think because I'm not very good with GitHub yet.
I think I think Alexander just walked out. He had to take a phone call or something, but I think he mentioned it. So we'll hear when he gets back. But yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I changed the links to Spectrum for the community link on the website.
Yeah.
And changed branding, I think, where I could.
Mhm. That's cool.
Place all the images and stuff. And I haven't gotten back to you on the at syntax thing.
I haven't. I haven't gotten back to.
I put it on the back burner for last week because I'm launching a product next week and
Cool.
kind of taking my time.
Is that the course or is it a different thing?
It's a course, yeah, language course, not programming language course, but an actual speaking language course.
Yeah. Cool. So we've been talking for the last. I've been experimenting a lot for the last days with new syntax. Basically, some changes in what will probably become Imba 2.0. And it actually started from the whole discussion we had when I thought about how to explain the difference between props and at syntax and all that to you. It is very confusing for for most beginners, and even for me, it's kind of an ugly part of the syntax. So we are considering some major kind of breaking changes in the language that will make things clearer and more consistent for both for new users and for experienced devs, I think.
Cool.
Alexander, do you have any comments on the pull request from Eric?
Yeah, I do. I was thinking maybe, could you maybe slice up the pull request? It's very hard to review it currently. And
Okay. It's all in one.
This is something else.
Yeah.
It's.
I don't know.
It's my first time actually doing pull requests.
Sorry.
Nice. But I can probably help. Files change 33. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very hard to review.
But it's mostly CSS changes.
Yeah, but if
There's a lot more cleanup that could be done on the styles, on the colors especially. I noticed that sometimes instead of removing a color, it would just add one below to override it.
Yeah.
So I noticed sometimes there would be like 5 overrides back to back. But I was like, well, I don't know how he's using it, and I don't want to mess with it too much right now.
I probably use it as my memory, basically, to be able to go back.
Okay.
Just experimenting.
I thought maybe less had some feature that I was not aware of. That you could access previous colors or something. I was like, I don't know.
No, it's just sloppiness. To me, it looks.
Okay.
It is just styling. Maybe we can go through it later today.
Yeah.
Alexander.
But is it okay if we rebase and merge it? Because then you don't really need to do anything on your side.
You guys can do anything you want.
Yeah. Cool. So what's next, Alexander, the meeting leader?
I was curious on the at syntax. So you were supposed to have a meeting with Eric. Did
we-
you write a blog post or something?
No, we kind of rescheduled it 4 times, and mostly me. And so we haven't had the talk yet. But everything feels kind of moot since we're going to change it.
Yeah.
So I think we should just get right to that now. To start talk through the proposed changes. Or what's your input on that?
No, I don't really have any input on. Actually, I'm writing something about it, but so maybe I'm gonna push that away too.
Yeah.
But other than, I don't think there's any other follow up like the pull request stuff. We could take that separately.
Did you have input?
No, on the at. I haven't. I don't know what your latest ideas on the at.
No, so the at syntax is up until 2 days ago. It was actually up in the air. I was even considering reusing the at syntax the way they do in CoffeeScript as just a shorthand for self dot to remove the discrepancy between what is. But then I kind of came to the conclusion that we should probably still keep it around, as it's already, if you define a getter and a setter in ES6, you always need to, like, you can't define this property of the same name inside a setter or inside the getter. So you do need
separate.
Yeah. Have you seen the private fields in
With like the symbol, symbol thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it and used it a bit. It's a...
Should I do the screen now? Probably.
Aren't you doing the screen now?
Oh,
No,
you are.
It says you are doing this.
The TV is so confusing because.
So
Sorry. Stop sharing. You can just take it over.
You can't share right. So I think you need to stop
I
sharing.
need to stop and then.
Yeah, perfect. So the ES6 syntax, if I can find it here, except there was a much better TC private fields here. It's basically using the, damn it.
Is it the one that uses the hash syntax?
Yes, it uses the hash for
Yeah.
kind of private. It's not variables, they call it fields. It's in essence, it's basically the exact same thing as what we were using with @syntax.
Yeah.
So one possibility to just make it closer to ES6 is to start using the hash syntax instead.
With but should I compile to this as well, or should
Not until that is very
yeah.
consistently supported. I'm not sure how this works with subclasses and if you extend the class, if you can still access the private fields.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing that ES6 is actually adding this sort of thing, it makes sense to keep it around, but just maybe change it to the hash syntax. Do you have any input on that, Magnus?
I like that idea.
Of changing it or just keeping it around?
Well, keeping the behavior around and
Yeah.
support maybe both syntaxes.
Yeah.
And then or move to this kind of syntax.
Yeah.
But here you need to explicitly define them first. Is that going to be, or is that actually required here? You know that?
I'm not sure.
How does it work if you don't define them? I'm guessing it probably does because they are like lexically defined or something.
Yeah. But see here, they still have no explicit self. So you do need to call like this dot to access it. We don't really need that. We could add that as well, but that's a natural thing to do if we move towards requiring explicit self, if we actually deprecate implicit self. But yeah, where were we? So the main proposed change is basically that I do understand that from talking to basically everyone who's tried Imba, the whole concept of separating dot and colon accessors is extremely confusing for most people. And even not to out anyone, but someone who's used it for 3 years now is still saying like, he's just trying, like, oh, this code doesn't work. Let's try changing this dot with a colon. That's not a very good way to do programming, I think.
I actually sent you a message like an hour ago where I was trying to use process.main.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a perfect.
So it's that is a good example where it is actually kind of confusing because you don't have any like good idea about whether it is a function or not. For me, it's not a big problem, and I don't think for Magnus either, because we know kind of deeply what's going on internally and the concept. We have a good grasp of what the conceptual difference is. But even if it's not confusing to me, I still find it very, very ugly actually, because we internally in Scrimba and Gitspeak, we use a lot of like rows returned from Postgres. We use some external APIs. We deal with JavaScript objects all the time. And then having code where there are tons of like some code uses dot, some code uses colon, it just looks confusing. It's not really good. And just to go through the historical like reason for this being is that in JavaScript, dynamic like getters and setters were really early and very, very slow when Imba was developed. So if you wanted to have some custom, let's say you have a class person and you somehow wanted the name to be, let's say it was supposed to be a combination of first name and last name. something like that, or surname. I'm not sure what the. Then you could either define a method so that you would like you actually call the method to get that result, and then that will look kind of strange if that is a method, but but these are properties. That looks kind of strange. You need to remember to use to call that, and that is just an accessor. So what is now possible in ES6, and I guess before ES6 as well, but it was just extremely slow, was to define a getter that looks like a property, like person.name, but internally it actually calls a function to return the value of that property. And that's what's happening with array.length and lots of the internal native stuff in JavaScript. But that was extremely slow, so it wasn't really an option if you wanted a fast language. And I didn't like the difference between, like, here you need to use parentheses, here you don't. So I really liked the whole Ruby approach, where you know that everything is a method. If anything is supposed to be accessible outside of an instance, then it is a method call. So that way we actually define, like, if you create a prop in Imba, internally the compiler outputs it as creating a method that returns the, like, if I now go back to internal JavaScript, it would basically return this, and def set first name value is first name. Now I'm using dots because I'm trying to show, like, this is the JavaScript that would be created inside of these functions. And the reason to do this is that every kind of property, everything you would do with objects in the Imba world would be method calls. And when you see that everything is a method call, it starts to look kind of useless to have these all the time. It looks cleaner, as in the Ruby world, if you can just skip these. And then you will just know that when you're using dot, you are actually always calling a function of that name. It looks like the second biggest contributor to Imba is starting to understand the language. Yes, the core functionality of the language. But now getters and setters are actually quite fast in JavaScript, finally. And when you are dealing with plain objects, name, Sindra, age something, I don't remember, 30 to 60 something, then you are, we should add syntax for this, then you will need to use accessors. So if I do this, object.name, then in Imba that is actually called object.name. But name, the name property of object, is not a function, so this will return an error. And that's the reason we introduced, like, the column. Then you can access the properties without calling them.
I guess you also could use bracket.
Yeah. So in the Ruby world, you consistently needed to use this kind of syntax instead. And that makes it more clear, actually, that it is a difference. But since you're dealing with objects all the time in JavaScript, then this would, for most people, be way too verbose, I think. Especially when you start to deal with things that are not, like, document location origin, then it seems very strange that this is the way you access that.
Yeah.
So in essence, you are using regular accessors for objects all the time in JavaScript, and it's time to remove that confusion from Imba, and it will introduce breaking changes. But the plan now is to, I have it in a branch already. It is to first introduce the option to create getters and setters. And the way you do that, it just get name, return something, and set name value. Then you set it. So if we have that's coming back to the @ syntax. Let's use an actual @ now, so I can show you how that's supposed to work. And then name equals value. The syntax highlighting here is not good because it's not supported in Imba right now, but it will look nicer when syntax highlighting works. So the way this will compile to JavaScript is it will compile it to native JavaScript getters and setters. And what that means is that if I now create a new person and give it a name, Magnus, then this will compile to plain JavaScript exactly the way it looks here. And in JavaScript then, whenever you do this, it will actually underneath call that setter and execute this logic. So now you can call document.location.origin just like you would. Everything works the way it works in JavaScript. The only difference for your existing Imba code would be that when you have an actual method like def sleep, then you will actually, this will not work. Like person.sleep, that just accesses the function. It will return a function. It will return that function that is defined here. So then you will need to remember to actually use parentheses. So you will need to explicitly show that you are calling something instead of just accessing. And the other big difference is that when you define properties, instead of compiling that to a def first name and a def set first name, it will actually compile it to a native getter and a native setter of that name. So the problem with that is that because we are changing the behavior of prop, it is difficult to create an automatic tool to rewrite your files for forward future compatibility.
I don't know. What does Magnus think about that? Can you write something like that?
Nah, I don't think it's possible to do that. Like the problem here is the def sleep.
Yeah.
Because def sleep was previously you could call that without parentheses, and now or you could execute it without writing parentheses, and now you need to have parentheses.
Yeah.
And so that's actually like the tricky case.
Yeah, but you could compile. You could always, if we have this class and somewhere you call sleep, we could do a compiler pass and on the existing files always introduce like parentheses everywhere where it sees that, okay, this was previously going to be a function call. But the problem then is that if that was a getter, if that was a prop, then now the prop is suddenly compiled to a getter. So it's not difficult. It's not possible for us to dynamically see what was initially a prop and what was a regular function.
Yeah.
That is the problem because it's not statically typed and we don't have all the.
Yeah, let's just implement TypeScript.
Yes.
Support
just to do the. So that's kind of a bummer that it will be a breaking change, but it's better to do that breaking change now while very few people are using Imba for big projects, and it will, in my opinion, it will make everything much easier for people to understand.
I guess you could have a. Like a debugging mode where it compiles to something that is really verbose, but like every time it accesses something, it checks is this defined as a prop or not.
Yeah.
So then, as you're doing the rewrite, you can then get much better errors.
Do you want to take meeting notes, Alexander, or should I?
I can do it. I'm just gonna quickly add this.
So then, like
that was a good idea.
Every place you write to.bar, it can first look at the bar, sees like is this a like is it possible to see if it's actually a property or not? Because it's
you like when we define properties, we can define a meta.
Yeah, or with the meta.
Thing, meta property on the. Yeah. We already do that. If you add.
Yeah, like default values.
Not only that, but if we do prop name watch yes or other like field something, then it will always actually create like a property on the prototype with information about that property.
But I still don't understand everything you went through. One thing that pops up is like Is the colon syntax going to disappear now permanently? Goodbye.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, because that's the most important.
Yeah, it is the most important thing. But if you have, like me, have several projects of hundreds of thousands of lines of Imba code, it is kind of important to know how to get there. So in the Imba compiler, it will take some time to rewrite that to use the new version of Imba, basically.
But is there a way of doing this incrementally? Or is that hard?
I'm not really sure. It would be possible to, I think if we, for a time, as we talked about, there could be a step where you first go through and mark the existing property things that you've defined as some kind of special type of prop that is still decompiling two methods.
Yeah.
Then you could consistently like just add parentheses everywhere.
Yeah. So like on the property, you can, if the property gets an option for still
like
compiling to
prop name, this is not a good, but yeah, prop name legacy or legacy prop, whatever.
Yeah, or just legacy follow through.
Yeah,
Same thing.
Yeah.
Or yes, legacy, yes.
And
then that can call the old one.
Yes, that could compile to existing methods instead.
And then you can have an automatic pass which adds parentheses to every dot thing.
Yeah.
And also converts every column to a dot without the parentheses.
Yeah.
So that's actually like a pretty good automatic thing. It's just to, something that converts every prop, adds legacy s.
Yeah.
And takes every dot without the parentheses as parentheses, and every column turns it into a dot.
Yeah.
And that should then still, everything should work. Yes, I think so. And then you can start removing legacy.
Yeah, then you would manually need to remove legacy, that should work. So we said it wasn't possible, and now...
Yeah, at least, I mean, you can
it's
do
not
it completely automatic, but I think it's nice if you can do something incremental.
Yeah, so that you can actually know that the code will still work. That's the most important thing. That should be possible. And that said, the whole idea is to also start adding these ES6 features in this branch. There's no reason to continue, like, since this is a breaking change, it should happen as soon as possible, in my opinion. And hopefully with a compiler pass where you can actually make the previous code work with new code. The other question that we could go through as well is whether we should, not at the same time, but in the future also remove implicit self. I'm not sure, do you have any input on that, Magnus, or are you like?
I don't really have any strong opinions. I think like once you have a good IDE integration, it's much easier because you can always see like either from the color or from something else whether it's on self or not.
So that already works at least okay-ish in Sublime.
Yeah.
And I think we should change, that's just kind of detailed, but I think we should change now in Sublime we highlight the variables instead. So you see, okay, value is not highlighted, and that is actually resolving to self dot. But I think we should do it the other way around maybe and make these kind of a different color, more like the color for, but that's up to the theme. So, but at least, so I agree with Magnus that it is possible to give a hint in the IDE. It is very easy for us to deprecate it later, because that's just a simple pass in the compiler where we insert self wherever the compiler thinks that self is implicitly called. Not called, but accessed. So, but the question is, will it look confusing? Like if you do this tag, my application. So for me, since I know what's going on, it's quite okay. But what's happening here is that, okay, so title is not a variable in the scope of this method. It's not a variable in the scope of this class, and it's not a variable in the scope of this whole file. So because it's not that, the compiler will actually add the self dot before. The reason I'm going through this is that for me it seems kind of nice and logical. It makes the code tighter. It uses fewer characters, But at the same time, when we went to the documentation of with Indian JavaScript with, which is actually kind of the same concept, even if it's much slower because we do everything on compile time, or they do as well, but we compile before. It's deprecated because it may be the source of confusing bugs and compatibility issues, but confusing bugs. I have heard from others as well that with was just a thing that no one understood in JavaScript. And this is very much like with. So in the future, it might make sense for us to remove it.
I've been thinking about it, and actually I think it's good. It's a nice to have if it's clear.
Yeah.
That's what's happening, then I think it's good because you actually do save a lot of if you have a data model.
Yeah.
And you don't need to specify the self all of the time.
Yeah, it is.
And I actually think it's more important for the getters than the setters. That's where it's more useful. So you can like just use inside the class. You can just use first name and last name without writing the like self of first name, self of last name.
And that's how it works in Ruby.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I remember Ruby, but is this right? End.
Yeah.
But so in Ruby, if you just write a here, it essentially doesn't compile to JavaScript, but it is the same as writing self.a. But if you do B10 in Ruby, it actually, because the setter does not use implicit self. So B equals 10 will just define a variable with a value of 10. So the question is, should we do it that way as well, or should we just?
You mean, because that's like the other alternative is to say that it's only for getters.
Yes.
And not for setters.
Yeah. So that if you wanted to actually set the title of the application, then you would need to do self.title equals. But then the question is, what should happen if you just do this? Should it throw an error, or should it implicitly define a variable? That's kind of shady as well, I think. Or you could do that, but then you go. Yeah.
I think like if we're going to that approach, I think it should throw an error.
Yeah.
It's like
you're allowed.
Then
you use var or const or let.
Yeah. Because you use that for declaring.
Yeah.
So I think I'm not sure what's like. I think having implicit self on setters is also fine, or could be fine. But I see like the biggest gain for me with the implicit self is for getters. And for quickly accessing fields. Which kind of is very nice inside a tiny method is that you can like. Like if you just have something which like in the first name and last name example, for instance, is like suddenly half your method becomes just self dot. So that's actually a pretty good outcome. Or a middle one.
I don't know, like when I'm thinking about it, it seems like for a beginner it's nicer. You can just start writing and then stuff works. But
if you don't understand it, but it's also kind of risky.
And then you can end up also with very different like the way your code is styled or how it's laid out. Some people might write it with the self. Some people might drop it.
But another interesting thing here is when we add support for destructuring from JavaScript. If I did name desk equals some object, this is obvious, like what this does, at least from ES6. But should it be possible to do this without var? And if you do it without var, should this actually compile to like self.name equals some name desk, or it's easy to start. We make it very easy to shoot yourself in the foot and all other limbs when we add too much magic in there.
That's very if you just forgot the var and then you suddenly
and that's a risk. Some people like it a lot, but especially when it comes to the tag syntax here, we will need to change these here to actual like setters. So instead of this compiles to input something set type text dot n dot whatever. When we start instead compiling it to actual setters, then the risk will be that if you have a typo, or you will then be able to set any kind of property that you want. Because it won't like crash because I can't find the method set type.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. This will just silently add that.
And to make that, to add that as an actual attribute of the tag, you will need to define an attribute on the tag type.
So what happens today if you write
it will basically always fail because it will compile to set type, and then this won't be a setter unless you define like
it's undefined, so you get like calling an undefined tag.
But I know a lot of people don't like that as well. Like they want to be able to write any kind of attribute and have it appear on the. So that would be a speed, like a problem with speed, but it would also be possible to always write these attribute setters on the tags when you compile the tag trees. You could compile it to actually like set prop or whatever type. And then you could have some intelligence inside of this method that could be,
Here it would also be nice to have typing though, so it's actually like a compile time thing. So that's a separate.
That's a separate tiny meeting, adding static typing to the language.
But okay, why can't we just go in an opinionated direction and say this is the way to write it? So in the earlier example, if we change it to be implicit on getters, and you have to be explicit on setters.
Yeah, if we want that.
Yeah, then you reduce the number of variations of how can this actually look like in practice.
Yeah, but then you could make an argument that you should just make everything explicit, because that's even more consistent. I'm not arguing in that direction, but I'm also maybe arguing that it could be okay to do it implicitly as well. The setters, I mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think at least that's a change for later, I think, because now
it's also very easy to change later. Like you do it automatically. It's just like one pass. And I think this would also be interesting to see in the light of some automatic formatter. Like you have in Go with Go formats. I don't think Go format does these type of rewritings. It's more a style guide thing. So this is kind of like you could have the same thing where both things are allowed, but once you type format, and it actually changes from one style to the other.
That's true.
And then the way we can enforce a change is more like, now we change the default as well, and then everyone reformats their file. It will be, it will follow the same pattern.
True.
So I think it's easy to solve later.
So then we are kind of on the same page. At least we are going to deprecate the colon syntax and make calling explicit with these. In my personal opinion, I've been fiddling with the idea of actually allowing you to call functions with exclamation mark, because I think that's very then you see that you are actually doing something with the property. That doesn't look good, but I know
just to save one character.
Yeah, to save one character. Then I understood that. Okay.
It looks like you're force unwrapping something.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, but you wanted it to be opinionated, so everywhere you can only call functions in Imba using this special thing, and that's what I've decided.
But what do you think, Simon? You write a lot of Ruby code on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's a lot more frequent to define methods and just call them.
Yeah.
Instead of making local variables.
Yeah.
And you might just say hey, memorize these methods, and then you call it once, and then it memorizes, and then the next time you call that method, it will just get the local variable.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely fine to have them have the getter set to work differently.
Yeah.
Without confusion, and say that, hey, when you get it, or when you just set the variable, it's in this local scope.
Yeah.
And when you get it, it's kind of just, where can I find it?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're even maybe proposing that it should work like Ruby, where this actually creates a variable in the local scope. Yeah. What's your opinion on that?
I like let or var,
Yeah.
or just like let and var should be the same thing.
Yeah, that's very strange.
But I have like never had a real case where it's like, oh, my code broke because I didn't specify like.
Yeah, but here, I think it's a bit different, or maybe because scope here, like in Ruby, the scope for local variables ends at, or it's like def creates a new scope.
Yeah.
And you can't access local variables outside def.
Yeah.
Because they're local.
Yeah.
But here they are kind of you can access from all scope levels.
Is that not possible in Ruby? No, you need to define globals.
Yeah, or you need to global or something. Yeah, so I think like here there can be a problem with like, for instance here, if you say that you can just you don't need var let and inside the method and then it will implicitly declare a method. Then the problem is if you add a let inside the class level.
Yeah.
Like there you say like var title. Suddenly you introduce a title there, and then suddenly that other method now changes meaning.
Yeah.
So now that title is no longer a local variable. It's a and I think it's not a problem in Ruby because the local variable scope is inside the method, and the methods are usually short, so you can see the impact. But the classes can be big.
Yeah.
So it's like it's unclear. Like is this a variable declared at the comment?
Yeah.
So I think it's like the variable scoping makes this a bit more annoying to have the implicit declared variables.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of agree, and I've gotten used to using let and var, and as Magnus said, I don't understand why they need to be two separate things. We could maybe just enforce. Yeah, that's a break. No reason to do that now, but I'd rather have actually var available as a potential variable name and then use let for everything. Yeah.
I have to go over a minute.
Yeah. So cool. So that I think that maybe wraps up at least the first part of the change. So Imba 2.0 will remove colon accessors. We will hopefully have some kind of rewriter that helps you migrate your code, and it will make calling explicit. But it will also introduce getters and setters and a way to do that. So for many things, like especially let's say you have a collection that mimics kind of an array, then you won't need to by collection dot length or anything like that. Then you just define a getter, which calculates backing or whatever. So most of that kind of code will still look clean and not introduce all these sort of parentheses everywhere. So parentheses will then only be used for actual methods like render or setup or.
I think it's very consistent. You can look inside a class, and if it uses def, then you know you need to use parentheses.
Yeah.
And if it uses get, then you know you don't use parentheses.
Yeah. What do you think now, Alexander? Should we go through the Eric Torado's?
You think that you mean the pull request?
No. The his actual suggestion.
Yeah. Before we go to that one, I was just thinking one topic that we could take that separately later.
Yeah.
I really think we should consider if we want to do the roadmap thing and then hear what Magnus thinks about that. Like, what is a good roadmap to have? Should we just continue discovering stuff and then making changes gradually, or should we try to have a roadmap which we actually communicate outwards to people? Yeah, it's a question.
Was that the alternatives or?
No, it's just I'm thinking out loud. If you have
is like a good roadmap. Yeah, I think it's nice to have something to communicate, but maybe like the most important thing is to communicate the things that you didn't get to do. and like it's easy to sit down and plan things and say like, yeah, this is what we should do in version 2.1.
Yeah.
Then of course you end up not doing things and just like communicating what you push back and what you change and what is tricky and being honest about all of these things.
Yeah.
Because it's like roadmaps will change or plans will change and you will figure out things that are tricky.
Yeah.
But to have some sort of progress and like not get stuck, like don't be afraid to say like, oh, we wanted this in 2.1, but it's really hard. Then it's better to just like release 2.1 with what we have, and then say this is tricky. Let's solve it later. So because I've always tried to like define milestones for projects, and I can never complete all of the issues there.
Yeah.
And then what I've figured out is like the best way is just to, okay, let's say we won't solve this right now, but let's continue pushing things out. It's more important to have like continuous versions that do slight improvements than to try to define like a 2.1 that's like really, really amazing. And I also think, I'm not sure how it works here, but like with when it comes to breaking changes, it's like I think the best way to do it is the hardest way to do it, and that is to first make it a non-breaking change.
Yeah.
Like first make it opt-in that you need to change something or set a flag, and then that is available for 3 months. And then after 3 months, you say that like every time you use the previous thing, then you get the deprecation warning, and then you wait 3 months, and then you finally remove it. But these things are really tricky because they also take a lot of time, and you need to have like duplicate code in your code base.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how proper we should be with the breaking changes.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off there.
And I think as time goes on, we should become more and more proper.
Yeah.
But right now we still have the opportunity to be kind of proper because it's not popular yet.
I think like having some sort of overall theme or goal is kind of nice. So maybe like an overall theme or goal of Imba 2 is to get closer to ES6.
Yeah.
But I don't think we might not even need to do everything in 2.0 and say like 2.0 should be the one that's that uses ES6 to its full extent. Maybe we just say like, okay, 2.0 should be the one that contains the things that requires most breaking changes.
Yeah.
And then like maybe changing some of the destructuring things, maybe that can come in 2.1 if it's not such a big change.
Yeah. I think that's a good, not that we need to decide now, but I think that's a very good split to say that 2.0 is actually just mostly the breaking changes, introducing getters and setters.
Yeah.
And then you can add all of these other CS like template strings, and most of those are just compile like things the end user won't even know about. Destructuring is another thing.
A bit different.
Yes.
So the structuring is kind of like in 95% of the cases, it should be the same.
Yeah.
And then it's all about the rest 5% if you consider that. But like maybe even you do that in a 2.1, but then it's a flag, and then we enable both things.
Yeah.
It's something to have in mind there.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to have some progress on 2.0 and actually like get it out and try to do incremental improvements.
Yeah. I agree. And I think the branch now I'm going to Australia for some time, and I think during that time it will be definitely possible to ship 2.0 during that time, like in November, just with the breaking changes here, like rewriting it. What will take the most time is probably to create a kind of a tool that will help you merge the things. But other than that, the changes are already working. It's actually like a 3-line change in the whole code base because it's such a simple concept.
But if it's really that little change, couldn't we then do as like the idea Magnus had right now? I think that sounds really good. But like instead of like trying to push a V2 branch, like communicating, this is the goal for V2. We want to have full ES6 support. That's that track, and then merge those changes and then enable them via feature toggle.
But actually, like
in the master branch.
Yeah, but now maybe like if you can do it, like if you have like the approach where like the idea with where you say legacy yes and then you get the previous behavior.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I was thinking like if you could have like a flag or something, so you can actually release a version Imba 1 point something. That contains it's a flag on compile time flag which enables it. And then people.
Yeah, but it's a compile time flag that enables you to allow that property, or that.
No, that changes everything. Like it changes the getters and colon is deprecated and all of that. So then we can kind of say, yeah, it's currently. I'm not sure if it helps or not. But then you can kind of say like, yeah, you can play with it and you can start filing bugs and you can start using it.
Yeah. So we haven't mentioned that, but the idea was anyway to actually release it initially as a separate package called Imba 2 with Imba 2 binaries until it's ready to be the main version of Imba. But that's just it's kind of the same purpose that you can let people experiment with it and
yeah, because now I remember it, because there we're actually solving a different problem, right? With the conflicts between the names and having the specific Imba version installed.
Yeah, and conflicts between what if you require another Imba project that obviously uses the old one, and it's going to be kind of a tough change for the few people who use. No matter what, I think it will be kind of problematic.
But is this something we can come back to and discuss before the next meeting or during the next meeting?
Yeah. But at least we all agree that we are going to make the change. So we just need to decide how to do it most smoothly. And I do think that the documentation and everything will actually, just from this small change, be more consistent and easier for people to get on board. So I think it's very important. Should we quickly jump to the proposal from Eric?
Yeah. Do you want to stop sharing so Eric could share his screen?
Or I can share it because we can see his.
This works.
Yeah. Cool.
I'll just make it quick here. I don't know what you call this, interpolation, right? When you combine strings with data. And I come from building static websites with Pug. In Pug, it's strings by default, and then you have notation for data.
Yeah.
And then they have notation to switch to be data first instead of string first. So I was thinking, what if we have, I love that Imba is data first, but I was wondering if there's a way to, if it would be possible to switch to string first, just because it actually is a lot faster to write that way. For example, the same string interpolation here, it's about 50 characters. But if you are able to switch it somehow with some symbol to string first, it would be only 6 characters instead of 15. And you don't have to be escaping symbols like these, like the quotation marks and stuff.
Yeah. So I definitely see your point. To be honest, I would always say that the third line here is what you would use, like the one that is 11 extra characters.
Yes.
So, and at the same time, you would not need to escape the single quotes, because you don't need to escape single quotes in a double quoted string or double quotes in a single quoted string.
That's true. Yeah.
It's actually 9 characters longer. And then we're down to like 3 extra characters, I guess. I do agree that I've seen the need for this as well. For me, it's mostly more about being able to inline, like make something bold or adding a span, or that's sort of a different problem, but that's I think some other people have mentioned this.
How it comes up is just if I want just a little tiny bit of dynamic data in a lot of text, it'd be nice to just be able to write everything without having to worry about escaping if I have quotation marks or things like that.
Yeah.
But should this also allow using tags inline? Like, should that support writing? Because I feel like that is kind of would be a nice separate feature. Is that then you need, if you want to write tags, you can do them with an open and closing.
Because if I jump back to my screen here, my board, this is a problem or a confusing thing I've experienced often. That is, you actually need to like be something, then hello. Like this sort of tag is not very pretty in Imba.
So if that could change to
So if
like a button and something,
if something adds, then you mean actually like
just old style.
yeah, where you actually close it as well.
Close it as well.
Yeah.
If that has that feature as well, then it solves like 2 problems.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Although it's the only place where we use the closing.
Yeah.
I also kind of dislike the closing, like as a syntax concept.
Yeah, me too.
So,
So you could, let's see, name. So this should, to be honest, this should work as well, though.
Oh.
No,
Okay,
or it should work. It doesn't work because
Yeah.
it compile like in the smart way.
Okay, but it could work.
Yeah, it definitely should. That's.
Do you think so? It's a string though, a string interpolation.
Yeah. That's true.
You could use curly braces in the first one instead of having the closing tag.
Yeah, that was also what I thought about. If you
Yeah.
had curly there, and then.
But then it
But
looks
then it's
very weird.
kinda-
Like, why is that a
then
B
I-
and why is this not? Then you would probably rather need
No,
to include.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. So if that was text, then you would need to do this,
But yeah, I agree.
or
And,
the whatever syntax you. I do like the idea, but mostly to me it's not that bad. It's much more. This problem is much more pressing. But I agree with Magnus that it would be nice to solve both of them if you choose to go ahead and solve one of them. Do you experience that, Eric, ever that you need to like split up the lines just to add some bolding?
Yeah. So if you go back to my example, I have the button here.
Yeah.
I don't mind honestly indenting an element that's nested.
Yeah.
And if you have a symbol like this in Pug, they use the pipe symbol.
Yeah.
So all the text is, and actually it's quite neat to look at with a pipe symbol.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe any symbol could work really.
Yeah.
But I don't mind using the button like that indented rather than putting it like this, you know?
Yeah.
But I think this could be an alternative. Also, I don't mind that.
Yeah, for me that's mostly for spans or bold or tiny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like pipe as well.
Yeah, I think pipe. They're having pipe outside the
Where would you have the pipe? Like, would you have a pipe on the first line or just on
or it
the?
depends on how you put it, but either on the first line or after the opening.
Yeah.
And you could do, bold, like that also, and it would put it in bold text after welcome. That's how I would do it in Pug.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's because
Except it would just be like that.
Yeah.
also because it's text first. But here I guess you would need another pipe outside or in the B tag.
B. Yeah.
So I guess in Imba it could just look like this, another line of text. And then you would have a button in between or bold or whatever.
But why not use the pipe as well in the Imba example? I think pipe looks nice.
Yeah, I don't know what's possible. You guys know, so you guys can do whatever. I'm just suggesting.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
Or if you put a pipe in here, it kind of shows that it's related to this,
Yeah.
Pipe is also nice, or it's consistent with the YAML.
Yeah.
So in YAML you use a pipe for a multi-line comment or multi-line script. So it's it has some precedence or.
So one Maybe we should just, it's probably not like the first priority, but it's definitely interesting to look at.
I also think, isn't this like a good good feature to try to have an RFC or some discussion on around it first, like do it, like create a proper proposal somewhere, and then discuss it more on GitHub issues and try to write like a decent proposal first and show some examples and try to come up with issues and edge cases.
Yeah.
And then it's something to, maybe it's also something you can put inside a 2.1 or 2.2.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a pressing thing.
No. And for me, it seems like it's obviously doable, but it seems with the the tokenizer and the Lexer, and then it seems kind of messy. At least since the compiler is so messy already, it seems kind of difficult to jump into the whole string mode instead, or but yeah, cool. One more thing before we go, because I wanted to discuss it with Magnus on tape, basically. We discussed that before, but if you do like def header something, this is also one of the confusing things for newcomers, that if you basically just do this, then it looks natural that this will insert your header thing inside of the render, like on top of self now, you will have the header element. That's what will happen, but every time render is called now, there will be created a new header element that replaces the old one.
So it's not performant.
Deja vu. Have we talked about this before?
Yes, we talked briefly about it. Okay. But Magnus and I have talked about it earlier, that it would be much better probably to, like now you will need to actually make that kind of, if you use the at syntax here and give it a name, then this becomes kind of the same type of magical tag that self is, in the way that whenever you call header, it will just re-render the same header element and make it up to date with your data and your state.
Yeah.
So you're going to change the default behavior.
I would maybe like, at least discuss with Magnus, the idea that I think he proposed it a long time ago, that everything is, like whenever you create an element anywhere, basically, it is compiled as this magically cached thing. So this would behind the scenes cache as some like weird sort of identifier specifically for this method, so that you will never shoot yourself in the foot with the defining a method where it will create a new element whenever you define it.
That's a good idea. Did I come up with that?
Yeah, I think so. So the only backside of this is that how would you, in some cases, you actually want to manually create elements using the syntax, but maybe that's just if it is inside of, if it is.
I think that also then should be cached as well.
You think so?
I think like I agree with it, some way of escaping the caching.
Yeah. But maybe whenever it's defined inside of a function or something, like, because it's not difficult to always like.
Yeah, it's also kind of nice because then you can almost like remove. No, you kind of need self as well. Yeah. To avoid the. Oh, never mind. Yeah, I think it makes sense to do that, or it seems like you do want to have caching pretty much all the time.
Yeah,
and you pretty much always want to use tags inside a tag class.
Yeah,
it's not like if you start using tags outside a class, just for like creating elements, it's kind of like it's a anti-pattern.
And it doesn't really matter if you do like at the bottom of the file, if you do var app, people's app, then it doesn't matter. It's okay that this is actually cached in the weird sense. It doesn't like.
Yeah, just like where is it cached at?
As long as it's unique. Yeah, this would be cached at self, which in this case is the window.
Yeah.
But if it's cached with a unique identifier, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But maybe it's too magical that in the root scope things shouldn't be cached, or that's just an implementation. There's no way you could possibly call this again. So there's no reason to cache it.
Yeah. But it's like
or maybe
about inside the method.
But what if you have like for item in items? item, then it does make sense. Could you call render later and it will actually update the contents? That looks too magical.
It looks too magical.
But it doesn't look too magical if you have like something that shows you that this is a.
But then it's a different.
Yeah, then it's a different concept. I agree.
But yeah, what if you have something inside a regular function outside of a class? What should that do? Then should it be uncached? Should it be like?
Yeah, maybe it should just be cached.
But then how? At what scope is it cached? Is it cached lexically?
That's a good question. I've always thought that caching should happen on this, like whatever is this when you call it. And I've been using that for some weird things where I actually just change the self when calling a function to have like a function that returns templates of.
Yeah, I guess it could also be like it's stored on the like in a function. It's stored just on the previous or the parent scope.
Yeah.
Like it's a closure. It's cached. So then actually, if you call the same function multiple times, so here if you have like a def foo and you use something, then it's cached at the parent scope. So then. I mean, it would. It probably, or I know I've written code where I actually.
Do you have a charger, Alexander?
No, not here.
I have.
Oh, cool.
I've written code where I assume that it will create a new element.
Yeah.
And especially because that when I use it, like I'm adding it, like I'm creating script tags and inserting them somewhere.
Yeah.
Or style tags and inserting them somewhere else and not using Imba for that.
Yeah.
Or just calling to string.
Yeah.
So there should probably be a way.
But isn't it possible
around that?
But what about having the actual thing where if it's the right side of a variable? Because in all these cases, you are assigning the script tag or something to a variable. Almost, aren't you?
Yeah, but I can kind of see myself writing a code where I assign something to a variable, and then if foo equals true, then I want to wrap it in something.
Yeah.
If you want to wrap something or not, then it seems very sensible that you. That you first say like var a equals header, and then if something, then a is and then wrap it.
That's because you write React. That's exactly the thing we want to. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can just see having the same thing, like variables is a nice feature. So it's nice to be able to use them with cache. Or I guess you just need another symbol for saying this is uncached.
Yeah, that's possible. You could do like.
Or actually, it could be, what if there's a tag called a new? Like parenthesis new.
Yeah.
It's like a magic tag.
That's so basically like self, like it's the same type of thing.
So before, so just anywhere you can type like, you just
script leak, basically new.
And then something else.
Yeah, so that kind of creates a scope.
It's kind of like the opposite of self.
Yeah.
Like self is like this one should edit.
Yeah.
And this one creates a new, just like this is a new. This is uncached, or maybe create or
maybe we should even. So that's one problem I discovered when I tried to create a proposal for the new branch. That right now we do .new. To create an instance of something, and but I made it for now. I made it so that new doesn't need parentheses. Yeah, that's a special case, but I'm not sure why. I think the reason I initially went the Ruby way instead of the JavaScript way was just because when you want to do like do.new, set up something, whatever, then you don't need to add the parentheses. I always found that kind of ugly, where you needed to explicitly show where. Because if you had this kind of syntax, then you wouldn't really need a tag either. You could just new.
Yeah, that's Yeah, that's actually cool. I guess is new now special, or is it only special in property? Is it like a keyword by the
It's a key. Yeah, it's a keyword. So this would basically crash now, or it would compile to self.new.
Okay.
Currently.
Yeah, but can you have a variable called new and things will work?
Yeah. Yeah, but that rewrites in JavaScript. Like it compiles.
Eric had to leave, so yeah. Should we wrap up? Go through shortly follow-ups and the agenda for next time.
Yeah.
I like this always cacheable and do it basically like inside a method. It's by itself.
Yeah.
And inside a, if it's not inside a tag, then it can just be lexically.
Yeah.
So then you can actually use the same caching and same thing with just regular functions.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat picture.
Yeah. I agree. Okay.
And feel free to update the notes. Today was a little bit slower than usual.
Yeah.
So if we look at the follow-up topics, so the branding pull request, we're going to look at that soon, and then the roadmap thing. So I'm thinking I'm going to just propose something, maybe a living document. Could be a markdown file that just lists a couple of issues.
Yeah.
And then if we just, we don't really need to set the bar high. It's just something that communicates it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Magnus mentioned the RFC process.
Yeah.
We're actually discussing, do we go the community route all the way, or do we go the academic route? Like what makes sense? And I think in the RFC process, or not necessarily the way RFCs are done, but like you have a proposal and you structure it, and then you make a request, basically, that thing.
Yeah, and I think it's also, if we know about something, it's sensible to do it through the RFC way. Either way, like you want, it's doubles down, it says the documentation and explanation.
Yeah.
And if you sit down and write a document explaining it, you will have to. It's surprisingly hard and takes a long time because you need to figure out all the edge cases.
Yeah.
Because when you're trying to explain, and then it should do this, you actually, it's like you're solving all the hard problems.
Is this something you could do? Like, could you come up with a proposal on a...
I'm just not sure how to explain how to structure it. I just like write down my ideas.
Yeah.
That's like my RFC process. It's just like, so I'm not sure what's good, but it's like there's two different things here. Like one is how should the document explaining the RFC be structured?
Yeah.
That's like one thing.
Yeah.
And then the separate thing is what actually happens. Like once you post this document, what should happen? And what are the steps to getting it approved? And
what happens when it's approved?
and how does this work with documentation? And like, so for instance, in the Rust community, they use RFCs a lot. And one thing that I dislike there is that often a lot of the documentation ends up being only in the RFC, or it takes a while before they get proper documentation out. And these RFCs are often written very much in a context, like in that specific point in time. So there's like some features in Rust I've been looking at, and then it's like, oh yeah, you should look in this RFC. And then when you read the RFC, I'm like, I don't understand anything because they're talking about all these problems and these problems that that were relevant for 6 months ago, and that I don't really know about. So then so I think it's very important that once you have like a feature done, you should get some documentation about it, and you should maybe like, okay, let's forget about the RFC. The RFC was about the proposal and the process, and not, because of this, for me, reading the RFC as documentation. It's interesting from a historical perspective and see what people meant, but for understanding the feature, it's not a good documentation document. So I think it's having some way of saying that even though we have this great proposal, that's not really enough. Like once we ship the feature, it should be like, then we should have a separate documentation as well. It's kind of important.
Yeah, if you have concrete proposals you could write down, that would be good, and then we could review them and look at it.
Yeah, I can I can try to.
You can.
Yeah, I have opinions on this, but then
You can propose the things you proposed previously but forgot about the always cached tags.
Yeah.
And the self stuff. Do you think do we have a branch that people could try out by 28th of October?
Yeah, definitely. They could try it out today, I think, but it's yeah. And I already think that we should ship that as a Imba 2 package, like the branch, just immediately to allow people to experiment with it without overriding their existing Imba and all that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I like the idea, but I have a problem with it. And the problem is it seems like you said it yourself. It's just a couple of lines changes, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like this is a V2 thing. Like when I think V2, I think something great is coming.
Yeah, but we can't in
this is really
minor,
good.
We can't in a minor update break the whole language.
No, but
it's a programming language.
And that's why we were saying let's consider the feature toggle. Sorry. So you can actually opt in for it.
But it's very difficult how you do that across different libraries that use Imba. And then you would need to do that at the top of each file or something. You want the compiler to on compile time. So if we use an external library, like Magnus wrote an external library for Scrimba, then we can just add a flag to the whole Imba thing running Scrimba now. Just say that it should use these breaking changes.
Yeah, because the thing with the legacy kind of only works if you do it consistently.
Yeah,
but you can still have that flag. I'm not sure what way.
Why can't we do it like ES6 does with strict mode? You specify per source level and then you just set it everywhere. And that's you can super easily run find and set, just append this.
Yeah.
So it's not
yeah, I agree. That's not a bad.
Yeah, I think that's a better feature flag.
Yeah.
It's that's how the feature flag should work, because it's a concept that works on.
But it's very weird that you use strict and it changes the whole.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be used strict.
Yeah.
It should be something else. I think.
Yeah.
Like in Ruby, they have this comment: if you write frozen string literal column true at the top of the file, then it changes so those strings become frozen.
Yeah.
It is like a performance thing.
Yeah.
So in Ruby, it's actually it's both a command line flag and you can do it per file. So there is a much bigger change, but suddenly you have tons of libraries that have been adding this comment on top of the files because it's improved performance. So it's actually doable.
But we do need to remember as well that if you add that to a file, every other file that uses it the objects from that file will be exposed differently.
Yeah. So if you're then using it, suddenly in other places, where you used to use dot, you need to go back to columns.
Okay.
So it feels like a kind of a breaking change to me.
Yeah.
In the sense that it is. We need to remember that we're in the unique position where we have a very unpopular language with not that much use.
Yeah.
Because if this was Python, you had the whole debate Python 3 versus Python 2, and that would be a huge problem. But here we have the opportunity to basically say that from the next version this will break.
But actually, I would say I think the feature flag on top of file is a nice thing, but maybe it should be the other way around. So then when we release Imba 2, you can get the old behavior by adding a thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you start a new project, you will use the new features, and then if you have an existing one, we can write a simple script, or you can provide a simple script that just prepends this comment on top of every file, and then you can use Imba 2, just as you did previously, and you can start changing the files.
But if what annoys you is that I said that it's only 3 lines changed, that's kind of an understatement, because it's actually when you need to change how the tag syntax compiles to native header since then. There are a lot of changes.
No. That it's not that it annoyed me. It's just like I'm speaking about like if we're making a V2 soon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just okay, let's assume this works and everyone is happy. Are we gonna make a V2 release with just that, or are we gonna wait X number of months and then do a V2 release later where we have more
now
features?
that you start managing the community and it seems to actually pick up some activity, it's critical to introduce these changes before more people are using it for real projects.
Yeah, but it seems
I
like so
see your point
little,
from
so
marketing.
little. You have to market
But
it.
But that you can do Imba 3 in 2 months. And,
and I think this is always tricky because from from one perspective, what you don't really want to have huge new majors with tons of breaking changes because people won't be able to upgrade.
Yeah.
And like the way you want to do things is to just slowly introduce features and let people do like a smooth transitioning. But from a marketing perspective, it's nice to push like this. Look, we have all these new cool features.
Yeah, we have single file components. And we have a file system based routing.
But that's more introducing maybe something outside the language itself, like introducing looks for Vue.js, like the single file components and
the single file component. But like
I know that's your.
I know, and I'm not going to push it that much, but like providing first-class support for CSS.
Yeah.
And so that would be great to have as a language feature. So basically, components would be possible just because Imba supports CSS on the tag level.
Yeah, but then there's something. I'm not sure how you can market these things. I think that's kind of one of the nice things with the more time-based versioning and time-based scheduling is that you can kind of make the time-based thing not so important from a marketing perspective. So you can kind of like have, this is a breaking thingy, but it's not. But you don't like now. You kind of need to call something version 2 because it's a breaking thing. But you also want to call version 2 the thing that has all the cool things. But that will maybe be version 2.4. But I'm not sure how to.
But also remember, we're in the unique position here where most people don't know about version 1 either. So actually launching version 2, you could still do that with a lot of like showing how neat it is, how tags work. If tags are not cached everywhere, that's a big change. You don't need to introduce that as a change, but you can just show how magical the whole tag rendering system is. Most of the marketing is just, most people reading about this won't think, there are almost no changes from version 1 that I never heard about before.
And you can also do a quite silent version 2.0.
Yeah, and then market.
And then market 2.2. Really.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's better.
So like a React hooks got released in like 16.3 or something. It was experimental.
So Imba single file components.
So it's just like the headline isn't Imba version 2. It's like Imba version 2.4. Now we have single file components, native CSS support, static typing. But I agree. It's always a tricky thing with all of this.
But then we can get back to it. It does make sense if the V2 is only to communicate that this is a breaking change, and we're not going to try to market it at all. Because it's a hard sell. You really have to have something that's if you're going to push it.
But I'm like a very big fan of the idea that features should, like the way you do things. If you have like a version 1, then you put just like new features in version 1. And then if something replaces something, you add it as a new feature and you keep the other one around. And then the only thing in version 2 is just flipping tons of flags, which or removing code. And like version 2 is the actual switch is very little code. It's just flipping the switch and making everything. It's like a deprecation point. Like a continuous improvements, and the only thing version 2 signals is that all of the other crap is now deprecated. Instead of the idea of like we have like version 1 something, and then now we should start on version 2, and then we should like do nothing in version 1 for 6 months, and then suddenly you release version 2 with a bang.
Yeah, but that's basically what we're doing now. We're doing that, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing your approach.
Except it's not 6 months, it's 3 weeks or something. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to see.
But remember, I totally agree with Magnus's approach. But it's just that we have to remember that this is a language and it's an actual breaking change. Like even if it's a small change in the compiler, it changes a lot of how you write code and how it looks and how it behaves. So it is important to at least get that out as soon as possible. Like if I wanted to start a new big Imba project today, then I would basically want to wait for this change because I don't want to rewrite. I have thousands of files already that I need to rewrite, so I don't want to rewrite even more files.
Yeah. But then, I agree. The marketing part is always.
Yeah, I agree.
Tricky,
It could be released as a 1 dot something for my part. It's just that's kind of a bummer for people. We could release it as 1.5, but I think more people will be pedantic about that and criticize like, why would you introduce such a big breaking
change? It needs to be the other way around. If you do it in 1.5, it needs to be like an opt-in flag.
Yeah.
And then if you do in
and that's difficult. The opt-in flag is, I agree, that would be cool, but it's very difficult because you rely on other projects or other modules written in Imba, and it's difficult because they will behave differently if they use the flag or not. It is very difficult to.
I mean, I would only say like the opt-in flag would be. It's really usable if you want to you want to just push it out and maybe get some feedback.
Yeah.
You don't really you don't market it much. It's just like, maybe it's easier for people who have Imba project can start adding it in and start you can get if people.
But what about just creating it as Imba 2.0 pre-release? And then say that everyone who creates a new Imba project now are advised to use Imba 2.0, but we do add some more like ES6 stuff and destructuring and things before we actually release it officially.
Yeah,
that's a decent approach.
Yeah, it sounds good. We should definitely discuss this more.
Yeah.
And I think there are lots of different ways of doing it, and I don't think we disagree with each other or have really strong opinions.
No.
It's more like we all see that there are different pros and cons with respect to marketing and all that. So I think we should maybe just make them 3 different ways we can do this.
Yeah.
And try to write out the pros and cons.
And also with regards to the marketing, if we want to do a different approach, like a more silent approach, we could do that. I'm totally open for everything. I don't want to limit it without discussing it. Cool. Thanks for coming. Should we wrap up?
Yeah. I need to go.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, I'm gonna end the meeting.
Yeah.